The Southern Caribbean has become the epicenter of a rare military standoff, with the United States and Venezuela locked in a high-stakes confrontation. Washington's formidable fleet, including Aegis destroyers, amphibious ships carrying thousands of Marines, P-8A, Poseidon aircraft, and a nuclear-powered submarine silently patrolling, faces off against Caracas's 15,000 troops, warships, and surveillance drones. Behind the U.S.'s declared fight against drug cartels and Venezuela's assertions of defending its sovereignty, a complex strategic picture is emerging. As both sides draw closer in these confined waters, every move risks igniting a crisis beyond control. The world holds its breath, waiting to see how the fragile line between confrontation and conflict will be decided. Like and subscribe to Military Power to witness the upcoming developments that could shake the entire region. The Southern Caribbean has turned into a stage for one of the largest American naval deployments in decades. Washington has ordered 3 Aegis destroyers, each armed with advanced radar and vertical launch systems, to sail alongside an amphibious group of ships carrying more than 4,500 sailors and Marines. Supporting these vessels are P-8A Poseidon aircraft designed for maritime surveillance and anti-submarine missions, as well as at least one nuclear-powered fast-attack submarine believed to be operating near Venezuelan waters. The scale of this operation shows that the United States is determined to confront transnational cartels that threaten American communities with drugs like cocaine and fentanyl. The White House explained that the mission is part of a broader strategy against groups designated as terrorist organizations, including Venezuela's Tren de Aragua and Mexico's Sinaloa cartel. To reinforce this policy, the U.S. Department of Justice recently raised the reward for the arrest of President Nicolas Maduro to $50 million, accusing him of leading the so-called Cartel de los Soles. Washington has stressed that these measures are taken under established legal frameworks and in full compliance with international rules, with the goal of stopping narcotics before they reach U.S. shores. For American forces, this deployment is not only about law enforcement, but also about ensuring freedom of navigation and stability in the hemisphere. Each ship carries enough firepower to deter potential threats, while the presence of Marines allows rapid response to unexpected incidents. Analysts note that the combination of air, sea, and undersea assets gives the United States unmatched control of the surrounding area, making it clear that the mission is more than a symbolic gesture. But if this is the buildup, how will Venezuela react to such overwhelming military pressure just off its coast? Venezuela answered the American naval presence by moving a large number of its own forces to the Caribbean coastline. The government announced the deployment of 15,000 troops to border areas and strategic coastal positions, with Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino describing it as an essential step to protect national sovereignty. Alongside soldiers, Caracas sent warships and patrol craft into territorial waters, claiming that these units would monitor shipping lanes and deter infiltration by criminal groups. The centerpiece of this operation was the use of drones, which the minister called a significant deployment, designed to extend surveillance across wide stretches of sea. Officials stressed that the troops were not only for defensive patrols, but also for internal security operations. Reports indicated that several battalions were positioned along the Colombia border to disrupt drug smuggling routes and clamp down on clandestine workshops where so-called narco-subs were being built. These semi-submersible vessels are often used by traffickers to move cocaine toward North America and Europe, and their presence allowed Caracas to argue that its actions fit within international efforts against narcotics. By highlighting these seizures, the government tried to claim legitimacy on the world stage while also showing its citizens that it was taking real measures to fight organized crime. The image of soldiers marching to their posts and Navy ships preparing for patrols was broadcast widely on state media. It formed part of a larger political strategy because President Nicolas Maduro sought to rally public opinion at a time when U.S. pressure was mounting. To reinforce this message, he tied the troop movement to the narrative of a country under threat, saying that Venezuela would not allow foreign forces to cross its maritime borders. This framing turned the military mobilization into a symbol of national resistance. Even though most analysts agree, the Venezuelan armed forces lack the technology and coordination to match American units. The contrast between the limited resources of Caracas and the advanced destroyers of the U.S. Navy was clear. Yet the government's goal was less about parity and more about projecting resilience. Another part of the Venezuelan strategy involved focusing on specific locations. Troops were dispatched to states such as Zulia and Táchira, long known as corridors for cross-border smuggling. By doing so, the government could present its actions as a direct fight against illegal networks rather than simply a political reaction to Washington. Authorities also emphasized that operations in the Northeast had already destroyed several shipyards linked to traffickers. These claims were aimed at showing that the Venezuelan state, despite sanctions and internal divisions, was still capable of law enforcement. This large-scale deployment, however, raises a crucial question. Can the mobilization of troops and drones truly change the balance of power when the United States has far greater naval and air capabilities nearby? The answer leads directly to Venezuela's reliance on mass civilian support and the controversial mobilization of militias. The Venezuelan leadership tried to expand its defense posture beyond the regular army by calling on millions of citizens to join paramilitary structures. President Nicolas Maduro announced that more than 4.5 million people were ready to serve as militias, a figure his government presented as proof of popular unity in the face of outside pressure. State television broadcast images of farmers, workers, and retirees registering for service, while officials described the force as a nationwide shield that could be mobilized quickly in case of invasion. For Caracas, this was not only about military readiness, but also about political symbolism, because the sight of ordinary citizens in uniform reinforced the idea that the entire nation stood behind its government. Analysts at the International Institute for Strategic Studies suggested that only about 200,000 to 220,000 members were active and properly trained. They explained that many volunteers lacked equipment, regular pay, or even clear assignments, which limited their effectiveness in a real conflict. This difference between official claims and independent evaluations highlighted the gap between rhetoric and capacity. Still, for the Venezuelan leadership, even the announcement itself had value, as it gave the impression of mass mobilization and deterred potential adversaries by creating uncertainty about the scale of resistance. At the same time, the government imposed a 30-day ban on all civilian drones. The prohibition was broad, applying not only to private hobbyists, but also to commercial operators. Officials argued that strict control of the airspace at low altitude would reduce the risk of sabotage and prevent foreign intelligence from collecting information on troop movements or coastal defenses. While the policy disrupted many everyday activities, such as mapping, filming, or agricultural surveys, it was presented as a sacrifice required during a time of crisis. The decision to combine a call for millions of volunteers with tighter restrictions on technology reflected a strategy of blending political theater with precautionary security steps. On one hand, the promise of vast militia support created an atmosphere of unity, even if many of those enlisted were unlikely to be deployed in combat. On the other hand, the drone ban showed a practical concern about vulnerabilities, because Venezuela has been targeted before by small, unmanned aircraft in attacks against government buildings. By addressing both the human and technological dimensions, the government sought to convince its citizens that it was preparing on every front. This second stage of mobilization, however, brings up an important question. If the government relies so heavily on public displays of unity and restrictions on civilian tools, how does it frame these moves to the international community as legitimate defense rather than political maneuvering? President Nicolas Maduro framed the military buildup as an act of pure defense, portraying Venezuela as the victim of foreign pressure rather than an aggressor. In televised speeches and rallies, he insisted that Washington was preparing for regime change under the cover of anti-drug operations. By describing the U.S. presence as a direct threat to national sovereignty, Maduro sought to rally his population around the idea that resistance was a patriotic duty. His government emphasized that Venezuela was free of cocaine production, pointing to the absence of coca crops on its soil, and claimed that all accusations of drug trafficking were false narratives designed to weaken the state. This language was not only aimed at domestic audiences but also at international forums. Venezuela's representatives at the United Nations accused the United States of escalating hostilities and demanded guarantees that nuclear-capable submarines in the Caribbean would not be used against Latin American states. Internally, the government presented its mobilization as proof of strength. Maduro encouraged public displays of loyalty, holding ceremonies where civilian volunteers were praised as defenders of the homeland. The emphasis on sovereignty served a dual purpose. It reinforced the legitimacy of the leadership while shifting the focus away from economic and political difficulties at home. By making the confrontation with Washington a central theme, Maduro sought to replace domestic criticism with nationalist unity. At the same time, analysts pointed out that such rhetoric allowed him to maintain control over a weary population by stressing external danger. Despite the strong words, military experts highlighted that Venezuela remained at a clear disadvantage. Its air force relied on aging F-16 fighters purchased in the 1980s and Russian Sukhoi jets that suffered from limited maintenance. Ground forces used outdated tanks and armored vehicles, while naval assets were mostly small patrol boats incapable of matching U.S. destroyers. According to independent estimates, Venezuela had about 340,000 soldiers, reservists, and militia members combined, while the United States maintained more than 1 million active troops, backed by advanced technology. This imbalance suggested that Maduro's defensive posture was less about actual military parity and more about political messaging. Still, the Venezuelan leadership argued that even symbolic resistance could deter larger powers by raising the cost of intervention. By presenting the standoff as a fight for dignity, Caracas tried to make any potential U.S. action appear disproportionate. Yet, observers noted that such framing also increased the risk of miscalculation, because a single clash at sea or in the air could quickly escalate beyond control. While both sides show determination, how do military analysts assess the chances of Venezuela standing against such overwhelming American firepower? Military specialists underline that Venezuela faces a clear disadvantage when measured against the United States in weapons, manpower, and technology. Reports from independent institutes place Venezuela around the 50th rank in global power, while Washington holds the #1 position. This gap becomes evident when looking at numbers. The United States fields more than 13,000 combat aircraft, compared with Venezuela's fewer than 250, and over 390,000 armored vehicles against fewer than 9,000 for Caracas. Such figures demonstrate that the two nations operate on entirely different levels of capability. The naval balance is just as striking. Venezuela controls only a few dozen vessels, many of them small coastal patrol boats or older landing craft, while the U.S. Navy maintains a global fleet of more than 400 warships, including carriers, cruisers, and nuclear submarines. The destroyers and amphibious ships sent to the Caribbean carry advanced Aegis radar, long-range Tomahawk missiles, and layered defense systems designed for both anti-air and anti-submarine warfare. By comparison, Venezuela's single operational frigate and aging submarine do not provide the same reach or reliability. This reality makes any direct clash a high-risk venture for Caracas. Ground forces tell a similar story. Venezuelan tanks include old French AMX-13s and a limited number of Russian armored vehicles, many in poor condition due to sanctions and lack of spare parts. The United States, on the other hand, deploys modern Abrams tanks, precision artillery, and advanced logistic support. Even if Venezuela can mobilize large numbers of militia, their training and equipment are insufficient for a modern battlefield. Analysts add that coordination between Venezuela's land, air, and naval branches is weak, limiting their ability to conduct complex operations. The only relative advantage Caracas holds lies in geography. Defending within its own borders provides shorter supply lines and some opportunity to use terrain to its benefit. Yet even this factor is outweighed by American surveillance aircraft and satellite coverage, which can track troop movements and identify weak spots. The presence of U.S. Marines stationed on amphibious ships nearby adds another layer of pressure, since they can be deployed quickly if required. With such overwhelming disparity, this leads directly to the next point: how both sides are trying to prevent escalation while preparing for the possibility that one small spark could ignite a broader crisis. The United States responded to Venezuela's mobilization by moving a significant naval force into the southern Caribbean, presenting both deterrence and readiness. The core of this deployment included 3 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, USS Gravely, USS Jason Dunham, and USS Sampson, each carrying more than 90 vertical launch cells capable of firing Tomahawk cruise missiles, anti-air interceptors, and anti-submarine weapons. Alongside them sailed an amphibious group built around the USS Iwo Jima, USS San Antonio, and USS Fort Lauderdale, transporting more than 4,000 sailors and Marines, including 2,200 troops from a reinforced Marine Expeditionary Unit. This combination provided the Pentagon with the ability to conduct surveillance, launch targeted strikes, or insert forces ashore if directed. To expand the surveillance picture, the U.S. Navy also deployed P-8A Poseidon aircraft, which can track submarines, map shipping routes, and monitor coastal defenses. Their advanced radar and electronic sensors allowed Washington to build a detailed image of Venezuela's military activity, reducing the chance of surprise. At least one nuclear-powered fast attack submarine was also confirmed in the region, giving the task force a covert strike capability and sending a clear message that the U.S. could operate without restriction in international waters. Washington described the mission as part of its counter-narcotics campaign, stressing that it targeted cartel networks accused of moving cocaine and fentanyl into U.S. cities. Officials emphasized that the objective was to disrupt criminal organizations designated as terrorist groups, such as Venezuela's Cartel de los Soles and Tren de Aragua. By framing the deployment within established counter-terrorism policy, the administration underscored that the United States was acting within international law and in defense of its citizens. At the same time, the presence of such a powerful fleet served as a visible warning to Caracas and its allies that the U.S. was prepared for any scenario. With destroyers patrolling near Venezuelan waters and Marines embarked just offshore, the Pentagon held the tools to respond rapidly if required while keeping the pressure on drug networks. The move reassured regional partners that the U.S. remained committed to stability in its hemisphere, yet it also raised the risk of unintended encounters at sea or in the air, where even minor incidents could carry outsized consequences. That danger leads directly to the final question. With 2 forces now operating in close proximity, how real is the chance that one unplanned clash could trigger an escalation on the side originally intended? With U.S. destroyers patrolling international waters and Venezuelan warships and drones moving close to their own coastline, both sides operate in tight proximity where even a minor mistake could spark escalation. History shows that encounters between rival militaries often begin with small confrontations, a low flyover, a warning shot, or a radar lock that quickly become crises. In the Caribbean, where advanced weapons and large forces are now concentrated, that possibility cannot be dismissed. Reports have already confirmed that Venezuelan F-16s flew near American vessels, buzzing at low altitude in what Pentagon officials described as unsafe maneuvers. Although no missiles were fired, such acts increase the chance of miscalculation, especially if radar operators or nervous pilots misinterpret intentions. A missile cruiser or submarine equipped with long-range systems can respond in seconds, leaving little time for communication. The reality is that when two heavily armed forces are watching each other at close range, the space for error shrinks dramatically. Military experts explain that both governments insist they want to avoid war. Washington stresses that its mission is to stop narcotics flows and reassure regional partners, while Caracas claims it only seeks to defend sovereignty and deter interference. Yet the combination of heightened rhetoric, mass mobilization, and military posturing creates pressure on commanders in the field. In such an environment, even an accidental collision between patrol boats or an unauthorized drone flight could be interpreted as aggression. Once shots are exchanged, political leaders may find it difficult to step back without appearing weak, and escalation could follow almost automatically. The risk is further complicated by outside actors. Venezuela's ties to Russia, Iran, and China raise the stakes because any clash could draw diplomatic or logistical support from those powers, turning a regional dispute into part of a wider geopolitical competition. For the United States, which already has global commitments, an unplanned confrontation in its own hemisphere would demand careful management. This leaves a crucial question hanging over the crisis. Can both sides maintain enough discipline to prevent a single spark from setting off a larger fire? Or will the heavy deployments inevitably push them toward a confrontation neither claims to want? As tensions simmer in the southern Caribbean, the standoff between the United States and Venezuela has laid bare a complex web of motives and power plays. The U.S., with its formidable fleet of Aegis destroyers, amphibious ships, P-8A Poseidon aircraft, and a nuclear submarine, aims to dismantle drug cartels while asserting regional stability. Venezuela counters with 15,000 troops, warships, drones, and millions of militia volunteers, framing its actions as a defense of sovereignty against foreign pressure. Yet with both sides operating in proximity, the risk of a single misstep igniting a broader crisis looms large. Despite the military imbalance, this confrontation underscores a shared need for de-escalation and dialogue to prevent unintended consequences. The world watches, hoping cooler heads prevail to maintain peace in the region. Stay with military power, like and subscribe to follow every critical update as this high-stakes drama unfolds.